welcome back to the next of the training method video installments. Now, this video is all about interval training. There are 4 different types of interval training sessions, and there can be a little bit of confusion at times. There can be some confusion between whether a session is deemed a fartlek training session or whether a session is deemed interval training. And there can also be confusion around what type of interval training you're actually performing. But each of the interval training sessions are designed to improve a specific energy system more than the other one. What we need to do here is we need to understand very carefully each of the types of interval training sessions. I'm going to show you a clip in a moment and talk you through what I mean by interval training session. Okay, now that we've seen that clip, we need to understand the benefits. Interval training sessions means that we can really work on the work-to-rest ratio that would simulate a game for team sports. Interval training sessions are very highly structured, which is a difference between that and fartlek training. Interval training sessions can actually promote lactate tolerance. Interval training sessions can help with improving pacing when you are running. So it's a way of assisting with overloading different runners' sessions. And it also means that we can train at high intensities for longer. So when we talk about interval training sessions, when we use the word work, we're talking about the period of time in which the athlete is putting in hard efforts. When we talk about rest, it is the time where they get their break in between their work efforts. Work intensity, generally speaking, we might use percentage of maximum heart rate or RPE, rate of perceived exertion. Reps, the number of work intervals that are repeated. Sets, the number of times that we go through a specific repetition phase. Interval distance is how far are we actually working within that repetition. Sometimes this can be for distance and sometimes it can also be for time, but again, that's that blend that confuses us with fartlek. So the work to rest ratio, don't need to go through this because it's something that we've spoken about in detail so far. Total distance is each rep and how many reps, so 50 meters for one sprint, and then we did 6 of them, and then we did 3 sets of those 650 meters, so you can total up exactly how far you've gone. Whether you're active or passive during recovery, and most of the time we're talking about passive recovery, otherwise, again, we start to talk about fartlek training. And then finally, we've got how many times per week we do this, which is the frequency which we know about. Okay, so into the first of the 4 interval training sessions. And the first one is the long interval training. Long interval means that the work period is long. So when we say long, intermediate, short, we're talking about the duration of the work period in comparison to the rest period. So the work to rest ratio is a 1-to-1 or greater. That means that it's an example like this. We did 2 sets where we ran 3 times for 400 meters. So that took roughly 60 to 90 seconds to complete each 400 meter. And if it took 60 seconds, well then we have 60 seconds rest. If it took 90 seconds, then we have our 90 seconds rest. So the work to rest ratio stays at 1-to-1. On this next example, we did 1 set. We did 4 reps. Each rep was 1 kilometer. So this runner did 4 kilometers all up. Each kilometer took between 3 to 5 minutes, and they went with a work to rest ratio of 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 here because they've gone with 3 to 5 minutes of running and 1.5 minutes worth of rest. So that is long interval training session. Long interval training sessions would like to achieve 15 minutes here. There's that swimming example. And the aim here is to increase the lactate inflection point by being able to achieve a higher intensity. This athlete, instead of just running 4 kilometers non-stop at a really good pace, was able to run one, have a rest, run another one, have a rest. And during that rest period, we know that the excess oxygen will be helping to get rid of some of those lactic acid and hydrogen ions. The next type of interval training that we need to talk about is an intermediate interval training. Intermediate is a work to rest ratio of 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, but the work period needs to be roughly between 15 and 60 seconds. If it's longer than that, we're starting to train the wrong energy systems here. This one here is about developing a tolerance to hydrogen ions and lactate. So it's about building it up and making the athlete work through that. This is sometimes known as speed endurance. The body will accumulate to building up a tolerance and will be working above the lactate inflection point for this one. And it is a very intense natured workout. So here's an example of intermediate. An example of the intermediate training sessions. So this athlete's done 2 sets of this. In each set, they did 4 reps, and each rep was 200 meters. So they've gone 200 meters, rest, 200 meters, rest, 200 meters, rest, 200 meters, rest, and repeated that 2 times through. Each of those 200 meters was taking between 30 to 40 seconds, so that stays within that 15 to 60 seconds of work. And then the work to rest ratio of roughly 1 to 2 for this one shows a 60-second to an 80-second rest. So it's a real different type of energy system usage within your body. The third of the interval training sessions is the short interval. Now, as I said before, long interval is a long amount of time of work compared to rest. Intermediate interval, we're getting the working time shorter. And then in this short interval, the work time is much, much less. So the work time here is under 10 seconds. The work to rest ratio is 1 to 5. And so the rest component should be passive for this one, and it will really help make sure that we're training the ATP-PC system. We're really trying to get the body to replenish its phosphate creatine as quick as possible, and we're really trying to work with phosphate creatine being our desired energy source. So this athlete's done 2 sets. In each set, they did 9 reps, and each rep was only 20 meters. They did their 20-meter sprint as fast as they possibly could. The RPE was 9 or 10 out of 10. And after that 20-meter sprint, they were completing one sprint every 20 seconds. So if that sprint took 5 seconds, then they were getting 15 seconds rest, which I know doesn't work within that 1 to 5, but we also know that it's not going to take 5 seconds to complete 20 meters of running. So this athlete will be closer to a 1 to 5 ratio. The final of the interval training sessions that we need to discuss is one that can have a lot of students cause some trouble in exam style situations. The reason why students struggle with this one is because it's a relatively new training concept. And what ends up happening is it gets blended in gymnasiums by personal trainers and other trainers of the like. And it actually gets turned into a blend of like circuit training or resistance training. However, for the purposes of our course, it's important to note that HIIT or high intensity interval training is aerobic training. It is a training method similar to a continuous or a fartlek where we are working through the aerobic energy system. The best way to explain it is to have a look at a high intensity interval training session here. There's a thorough warm-up on a stationary bike. Low speed for 30 seconds, moderate speed for 20 seconds, and high speed for 10 seconds. The total time for one repetition is 1 minute, which is a 30 plus 20 plus 10. And we complete 5 repetitions of this, followed by 2 minutes of low to moderate speed recovery. High intensity training is actually working on different intensities, but making sure that the session itself runs for a long period of time. When we intersperse real high intensity sessions for short periods of time into continuous work, we are completing high intensity interval training. There's no set formula for HIIT, but athletes will manage their HIIT training sessions to mainly replicate what their team sport would be enduring. What I'd like to leave you with is the option here of writing down an example of a long interval training session, an intermediate interval training session, a short interval training session, and a HIIT session, and send it through to me so I can check through to make sure that your work to rest ratios, the duration of your work, the number of sets and reps, the energy system you're targeting is all in line with which of those interval training types that you are actually trying to hit at that time. Good luck. Feel free to ask me any questions.